The rain wasn't the harshest thing that evening. Derek's palm on my shoulder blade was. He wasn't pushing me. He was positioning me like an unwanted piece of decor being relocated to storage. "You get this, right?" he muttered, glancing at his platinum watch. "The clients arrive in 20 minutes. And honestly, Emma, the awkward walking, those puffy feet, it clashes with the whole atmosphere." I stood on the doorstep of the home I'd maintained impeccably, staring at the man I'd married. "You're hurting the brand image right now," he continued with a sigh, pressing a cheap motel keycard into my palm. "Just wait there until you're not pregnant anymore." Then he shut the door. The deadbolt clicked. Just like that, I was dismissed. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I'd love to know who's the part of our community right now. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't yell through the mail slot. I stared at that solid oak door, the one I'd stripped and refinished myself last spring, and felt absolutely nothing. No devastation. Just a terrifying, crystalline clarity. I walked to my vehicle, the sensible sedan Derek despised because it didn't complement his Porsche, and I drove off. The rain transformed the city lights into streaks of color, but my thoughts were razor-focused. This wasn't an argument. This was a contract termination. I should have recognized it earlier. Our marriage hadn't been a partnership. It had been a perpetual open house. Derek was a high-end property consultant in a city where appearance wasn't just important, it was everything. He marketed dreams. He marketed the fantasy of seamless, polished, contemporary perfection. And for the past 3 years, I had been the finishing touch in his most crucial listing, his own existence. People always questioned why I left my position as an interior designer the month we married. Derek told everyone he wanted to spoil me. He claimed he was traditional, that he wanted to provide. But that was just the sales pitch. The reality was far more calculated. In Derek's elite circles, a wife with a career suggests the husband isn't earning enough. A working woman shares the financial burden, but a trophy wife demonstrates that the mortgage is meaningless. I wasn't removed from my career because he wanted a homemaker. He didn't care about home-cooked dinners or pressed shirts. We had staff for that. He removed me because he needed a status symbol. He needed a silent, refined mannequin to accompany him at fundraisers, signaling to every prospective client that he was wealthy enough to keep a talented woman idle. I had confused his control for protection. I believed he wanted to safeguard me. Now, watching the windshield wipers cut through the deluge, I understood he just wanted to curate me. I was the designer armchair in the corner, costly, attractive, and absolutely forbidden to show any imperfection. But pregnancy isn't polished. It's chaotic. It's swollen ankles and nausea and a body that refuses to follow architectural plans. By becoming pregnant, I hadn't just gained weight, I had malfunctioned. I was a decorative piece that no longer suited the aesthetic of the space, so I was being relocated to storage until I could be restored. I pulled into the lot of the motel. The neon sign flickered overhead, the Grand View Hotel. It wasn't grand, but it was dry. I turned off the ignition. I didn't weep. I didn't phone my mother. I opened the glove box and retrieved a disposable phone I'd purchased 3 days earlier, the day I discovered the surveillance footage. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a threat he had severely underestimated, and it was time to demonstrate to Derek exactly what happens when the furniture starts rearranging itself. The room reeked of furniture polish and stale climate control. I perched on the bed's edge, listening to the mini refrigerator's hum. It was a standard double room costing $92 nightly. I examined the flaking wallpaper and nearly laughed. It was absurd. It was comical because I could have purchased this motel. I could have purchased the entire franchise. And Derek, the man who'd just evicted me for damaging his aesthetic, had no idea. He believed I was Emma, the scholarship student from Michigan who enjoyed interior design and peaceful evenings. He believed I was alone, dependent, and easily controlled. He didn't know my surname was actually Blackwell. He didn't know my father was Richard Blackwell, the man whose investment corporation owned half the skyline Derek was so desperate to market. He didn't know that sitting in a trust fund, untouched and accumulating interest since I turned 21, was $74 million. I hadn't concealed it to be deceptive. I concealed it because I'd fallen into the trap of the perfect daughter. Growing up, I observed how people regarded my father. They didn't see a person, they saw a bank vault. They saw leverage. I wanted to be valued for qualities that couldn't be itemized on a balance sheet. I wanted to believe that if I brought nothing to the relationship except my heart and my efforts, and someone loved me regardless, it would be genuine. So, I wore my modesty like a medal of honor. I allowed Derek to cover the mortgage. I allowed him to lecture me about budgeting for groceries. I bit my tongue when he boasted about his commissions, pretending his $60,000 checks were life-changing money while I had quarterly dividends that exceeded his annual income. I told myself I was being noble. I told myself I was constructing a foundation of trust based on character, not capital. I was wrong. I wasn't building trust, I was building a cage. By making myself small, by concealing my power, I hadn't found a man who loved me for who I was. I had found a man who loved that I was controllable. Derek didn't love my simplicity. He loved my dependency. The perfect daughter narrative was just golden handcuffs I'd fastened onto my own wrists. I believed if I was flawless enough, quiet enough, supportive enough, I would earn his devotion. But you cannot earn the devotion of a man who views people as inventory. I looked at my reflection in the dark television screen. The perfect daughter was gone. She'd been abandoned on a doorstep in the rain. The woman sitting in this motel room was finished testing herself. I didn't need to prove I could survive without my inheritance anymore. I had done that. I had survived his ego, his neglect, his cruelty. Now it was time to stop surviving and start liquidating. Can Emma actually take Derek down? Or is she in over her head? Comment your predictions and hit subscribe so you don't miss our interesting stories. I reached for my bag and extracted the laptop I'd salvaged. I wasn't going to call my father crying. I wasn't going to request a rescue. I was going to access the accounts I hadn't touched in 4 years. I entered the password. The screen illuminated my face with the blue glow of 8-figure balances. Derek wanted to compete in the major leagues. He wanted to impress the titans of industry. Fine. He was about to encounter one, and she was extremely angry. 3 days later, I was back in the house. Not physically. I wouldn't set foot in that mausoleum again without protective gear, but digitally. Before leaving, I had installed a security camera in the nursery. It was a premium model, motion-activated with cloud backup. I'd purchased it hoping to watch my baby sleep. Now I was using it to watch my marriage disintegrate. I sat in the motel room, laptop open, scrolling through the alerts. Motion detected, nursery. 2:14 p.m. I clicked play. The video stream loaded. The room was soft yellow, painted just last week. The crib I'd assembled myself stood in the corner. But the room wasn't empty. Derek was there, and he wasn't alone. Caitlin was with him. I knew her. She was a wellness influencer Derek occasionally hired to stage his properties. A woman whose entire personality was a curated social media feed of smoothies and exercise routines. She was leaning against the changing table, laughing. "It's so bland," she said, trailing a manicured finger over the mobile I'd hand-stitched. "Are you really going to keep this?" Derek laughed, a sound that twisted my stomach. He was pacing the room, checking his phone. "God, no. This whole room is wasted square footage. You know how much value a home office adds in this neighborhood?" But Emma insisted. "The baby needs a sanctuary." He mimicked my voice, making it sound shrill and unreasonable. "She's so nesting," Caitlin giggled. "It's exhausting," Derek corrected. He walked over to the crib and nudged it with his foot. "Look at this thing. It's massive. Where am I supposed to put my exercise bike?" "Seriously, Kate, the kid isn't even here yet, and it's already monopolizing all the space. It's going to destroy my sleep schedule. It's going to destroy the atmosphere of the house. I didn't sign up for a roommate who cries and soils itself." I froze. I rewound the video. It's going to destroy the atmosphere. It wasn't just cruelty, it was something deeper, something twisted. Derek didn't just resent the inconvenience of a baby. He resented the baby's existence. In his world, there was only room for one star, one focal point, one person whose needs mattered. A baby wasn't a joy. It was a competitor. It was a tiny, demanding rival that would steal the attention he believed was rightfully his. He wasn't afraid of being a bad father. He was afraid of being upstaged. This was what psychologists called a narcissistic injury. The pregnancy had shifted the spotlight from him to me, and eventually to the child. And he couldn't handle it. That's why he called me a liability. That's why he evicted me. Because I was no longer reflecting his glory. I was growing something that would eclipse it. I watched Caitlin pull him into a kiss right there in the middle of the nursery, disrespecting the only pure space in that entire house. But I didn't feel jealousy. I felt a cold, hard resolve clicking into place like a safety being removed from a weapon. He hated the baby because it threatened his ego. He hated me because I was no longer a perfect mirror. He thought he was the king of his little castle, surrounded by admirers and decorations. He didn't realize the castle was built on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. What would you do if you discovered this? Drop your thoughts below. I closed the laptop. I wasn't sad anymore. I was ready. He wanted to protect his precious spotlight. Fine. I was about to turn the stage lights up, so high they would incinerate him. My phone felt heavy in my hand, not with hesitation, but with the weight of the weapon I was about to fire. I dialed the number I hadn't called in 4 years. It rang once. Emma. My father's voice was rough, surprised. Is everything all right? No, I said, my voice steady. But it's going to be. I don't need you to rescue me, Dad. And I don't need a loan. I need to make a business transaction. What kind of transaction? A hostile takeover, I said. I want to purchase the Summit penthouse, and I want Derek to be the broker. There was a pause on the line, heavy with unspoken questions, followed by the slow, grim realization of a man who built an empire on crushing competitors. The Summit, that's a $45 million listing. Derek doesn't handle that weight class. He will if he thinks he's being scouted by Blackwell Capital. I want him to believe he's landed the whale. I want him to taste that commission. I want him to spend it in his head before he even signs the contract. And then, when he's leveraged everything he has to close the deal, I want to walk into the room. Consider it done, my father said. The warmth in his voice was gone, replaced by the steel of the CEO. I'll have Thomas call him within the hour. The Trojan horse is ready. I hung up. It wasn't a conversation between a father and daughter. It was a strategy session between majority shareholders. The trap was set beautifully. Thomas, my father's CFO, made the call at 9 a.m. sharp. He played the part perfectly, the impatient, high-powered executive representing a mystery buyer who valued privacy above all else. He told Derek that the buyer wanted the Summit penthouse. Cash offer, no contingencies, but demanded a broker who could handle exclusive, high-velocity demands. I didn't need a security camera to know how Derek reacted. I knew him. He would have taken the call in his home office, probably leaning back in his chair, trying to sound bored while his heart hammered against his ribs. This was the deal he'd spent his life chasing. $1 million commission in a single afternoon. It was his ticket to the big leagues. It was validation. And true to form, Derek let his greed do the heavy lifting. Thomas told him the buyer required a good faith gesture, exclusive access to the property for the signing, staged to specific exorbitant standards, paid for upfront by the broker to demonstrate commitment to the luxury standard. It was a test, Thomas said. A test of liquidity and class. Derek didn't have the liquidity, but he had the ego. I watched the movement on our joint accounts, the ones he thought I was too naive to monitor. He drained the savings. He maxed out the business line of credit. He even took a high-interest short-term loan against the equity of the firm he worked for, likely forging a signature or two, convinced that the commission check would clear in 48 hours and cover the crater he was digging. He spent nearly $90,000 in 24 hours, booking florists, caterers, renting high-end art to stage a penthouse that didn't need staging. He was leveraging assets he didn't have to impress a client who didn't exist. He wasn't just buying flowers, he was buying his own hype. He thought he was investing in his future. He didn't realize he was financing his own execution. Will Derek realize he's being set up, or will he walk straight into Emma's trap? Comment below, and subscribe for part 5 where everything explodes. He called me that night, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. Emma, he said, sounding breathless. I've got huge news. Massive. When this deal closes tomorrow, we're going to have a serious talk about your attitude. I'm about to become the biggest name in the city. You might want to rethink that motel stay. I'm rethinking everything, Derek, I said. Good luck with the closing. Luck is for losers, he scoffed. I hung up and checked my reflection in the mirror. He was right. It did take skill to destroy a man without ever touching him. And tomorrow I was going to give him a masterclass. The boardroom of the Summit Tower felt less like a meeting space and more like a predator's observation deck. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of the city Derek believed he now owned. He was sitting at the head of the mahogany table, spinning a fountain pen between his fingers. Caitlin was there too, ostensibly as his staging consultant, though she was currently taking selfies against the skyline, checking her angles in the reflection of the window. Stop fidgeting, Kate, Derek snapped, though he was smiling. This is the big leagues. Act like you've been here before. I'm just excited, she pouted, sliding into the chair next to him. $45 million. That commission is going to buy us a lot of smoothies. It's going to buy us a legacy, he corrected. He checked his watch. They're late. Typical power move. Make the broker sweat. He laughed, leaning back, putting his feet up on the edge of the $3,000 chair. Let them play their games. I've got the staging perfect. I fronted the costs. I proved I'm the only one in this city with the liquidity to handle a deal this size. Once they sign, I'm untouchable. The double doors opened. Derek swung his legs down, straightening his tie. Thomas walked in. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, gray suit, gray hair, gray expression. He didn't look at Derek. He didn't look at Caitlin. He placed a single file folder on the table. Mr. Blackwell, Derek said, standing up, extending a hand. Pleasure. As you can see, the unit is pristine. We're ready to execute. Thomas didn't shake his hand. I am not Mr. Blackwell, he said, his voice flat. I am the CFO. Mr. Blackwell does not attend residential closings. However, the principal owner of the holding company insisted on being here personally to review the final contingencies. Derek blinked, his smile faltering for a microsecond. The owner of the building? Of the company buying it, Thomas corrected. And the company that owns the brokerage you work for. Derek frowned. I don't. My agency is independent. Your agency was acquired this morning, Thomas said, checking his phone. Hostile takeover. It was quite efficient. He turned toward the doors. Madam Vice President, we are ready for you. The doors swung open again. What happens when Emma walks through those doors? Drop your reaction in the comments. The woman who walked in wasn't waddling. She wasn't swollen. She was gliding. She wore a tailored black power suit that accommodated her pregnancy not as a burden, but as a fact of nature. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look at the view. She looked directly at the head of the table. Derek's face went slack. It wasn't just shock, it was a malfunction. He looked from Thomas to the woman, his brain failing to bridge the gap between the weeping wife he'd evicted and the titan standing before him. Emma, he whispered. The words sounded ridiculous in the silence of the room. Sit down, Derek, I said. My voice wasn't shrill. It wasn't the voice of the woman who asked permission to buy organic milk. It was the voice of the majority shareholder. What? What are you doing here? He looked frantically at Caitlin, who had frozen mid-selfie. This is a private closing. You can't be here. I told you you're a liability. I'm not a liability, I interrupted, walking to the head of the table. I'm the vice president of Blackwell Capital, and I'm the one buying this penthouse. I reached into the folder Thomas had laid down.
I didn't pull out a real estate contract.
I pulled out a thick stack of documents stapled with blue legal paper. You wanted to impress the client, Derek. You wanted to show you had skin in the game. I slid the papers across the mahogany. They stopped exactly at the edge of the table, right in front of him. Congratulations. You have our attention. He stared at the papers. That, I said, pointing to the top document, is a summary of the $90,000 you embezzled from your firm's escrow account to pay for the staging of this unit. Fraud, Derek. It's a felony. His face drained of color. I was going to put it back once the commission cleared. There is no commission, I said. Because there is no deal. Blackwell Capital isn't buying this unit from you. We already own the building. We just acquired the debt on your agency, which means we now own the audit trail of every illegal loan you took out in the last 48 hours. I motioned to Thomas. Show him the rest. Thomas stepped forward. We have also notified the licensing board. Your broker's license has been suspended pending investigation. And the short-term loan you secured against your personal assets? That was through a subsidiary of ours. It's due immediately. Derek stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Emma, stop.
Stop this.
I did this for us. I wanted to be big for us. You can't destroy me, because I was ambitious. I'm not destroying you, because you were ambitious, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I'm evicting you, because you were cruel. I placed the second document on the table. Divorce papers. You called our child a liability. You called me furniture. You brought her. I gestured to Caitlin, who is now shrinking into her chair. Into our nursery. You treated your life like a showroom and your family like props. Well, the lease is up. I leaned over the table, getting close enough that he could see the clarity in my eyes. You aren't a broker anymore, Derek. You aren't a husband. You are a bad investment. And I am liquidating. You can't do this, he stammered, looking around the room as if an audience might save him. I'm Derek Miller. I'm a brand. You're a tenant, I corrected. And you have 24 hours to vacate my property. All of it. I turned to Thomas. Have security escort them out. And Thomas, have the nursery repainted. The atmosphere in there is terrible. I turned and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. I didn't need to see the ruin. I had already seen the blueprints. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. In the world of high-stakes real estate, reputation is currency, and Derek had just filed for bankruptcy. By the time he reached the lobby of the Summit Tower, his agency had already drafted his termination letter. Gross misconduct. Attempted fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. The labels stuck to him like tar. The brand of Derek Miller wasn't just damaged, it was liquidated. I heard he tried to spin it for a few weeks. He told people he was going independent, that he was pivoting to consulting. But the city knew. The developers knew. And without the access, without the credit lines, without the showroom wife to anchor his image, he simply faded. He lost the Porsche. He lost the condo. Caitlin moved on to a personal trainer with a larger following before the first credit card bill bounced. Derek was left with exactly what he had brought to the table, an empty suit and an ego that couldn't pay the rent. 6 months later, my life looks very different. I'm sitting on the floor of my living room. It isn't a penthouse. It's a sprawling older house with creaky floorboards and a garden that needs weeding. There's a pile of laundry on the sofa. There are brightly colored blocks scattered across the rug. It isn't sleek. It isn't beige. It's messy, chaotic, and vibrant. And it is mine. I look down at the baby in my arms. Leo. He's drooling on my silk blouse, and I don't care. I don't worry about the aesthetic. I don't worry about the atmosphere. I worry about the quarterly reports for the Blackwell Foundation, which I'm now running. And I worry about whether Leo is warm enough. My father comes over on Sundays. He doesn't talk about business much anymore. He sits on the floor and builds block towers, trying to make his grandson laugh. He told me once that he regretted teaching me to be quiet. He said he should have taught me to roar. I told him I didn't need to roar. I just needed to stop whispering. I often think about the woman who sat in that motel room, terrified and pregnant, calculating her worth based on how well she could hide her power. I want to tell her that the perfect daughter trophy she was polishing was actually a participation award for her own erasure. I want to tell her that love isn't about fitting into someone else's blueprint. I realized something during the eviction of my husband. There's a difference between net worth and self-worth. My net worth was always high, hidden in trust funds and portfolios. But my self-worth had been in the negatives because I believed that being low maintenance was a virtue. It isn't. It's an invitation for people like Derek to treat you like a fixture. I'm not low maintenance anymore. I'm high standards. I don't shrink to fit the room. I buy the building. And if anyone ever tells me again that I'm taking up too much space, or that my reality is ruining their aesthetic, I won't apologize. I will show them the door. Sometimes the people who claim to love us are just loving the space we take up in their showroom. They love what we represent, not who we are. They love the idea of us, the quiet, manageable version that doesn't challenge their narrative or threaten their spotlight. For years, I believed that hiding my wealth was noble. I thought it would help me find authentic love. But all it did was attract someone who loved my dependency. Derek didn't fall in love with Emma the person. He fell in love with Emma the manageable, controllable, affordable accessory. The moment I stopped being manageable, the moment my body changed, my priorities shifted, my needs became more complex. I became disposable. Because I was never a partner to him. I was inventory. And when inventory no longer serves its purpose, it gets liquidated. The cruelest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the eviction. It was the realization that I had participated in my own diminishment. I had made myself small, thinking it would make me loved. But making yourself small doesn't make you lovable. It just makes you easy to overlook. I learned that power hidden is power wasted. I learned that humility can become a cage if you're not careful. I learned that the right person will never ask you to shrink, to hide, to minimize yourself for their comfort. Now I teach Leo something different. I teach him that taking up space isn't selfish. It's necessary. That having needs isn't a burden. It's human. That being high maintenance isn't a character flaw. It's setting standards. I teach him that love should expand you, not compress you. That the right people will celebrate your growth, not resent your evolution. That anyone who calls you a liability when you're at your most vulnerable is showing you exactly who they are, and you should believe them. The woman I was, the one who apologized for existing, who made herself convenient, who believed that love meant accommodation, she's gone. She was evicted that night in the rain. And honestly, good riddance. The woman I am now doesn't apologize for her inheritance. She doesn't hide her intelligence. She doesn't pretend to be less capable than she is to make others comfortable. She doesn't trade her dignity for approval. I still think about Derek sometimes. Not with anger, but with something closer to pity. He's still out there somewhere, probably still trying to sell the fantasy of effortless perfection. Still trying to curate a life that looks good in photographs but feels empty in person. He'll probably find another woman willing to play furniture in his showroom. Someone else who will mistake his control for care, his criticism for standards, his neglect for independence. And maybe she'll be happy with that arrangement. Or maybe she'll end up sitting in a motel room one night, staring at a keycard, realizing she's been living in a museum instead of a home. I hope she figures it out faster than I did. As for me, I'm teaching my son that people aren't props. That homes should be lived in, not staged. That mess is evidence of life, not a failure of management. That taking up space isn't selfish, it's survival. And when he's older, when he asks about his father, I'll tell him the truth. Some people are so focused on their reflection that they can't see the people standing next to them. His father loved an image. I love a person. And that made all the difference. You are not furniture. You are not decor. You are not a liability because you have needs, because you change, because you grow. You are not taking up too much space. You're just finally taking up the space that was always yours. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. Your reality isn't less valid because someone finds it inconvenient. Your existence isn't too much because someone finds it overwhelming. You are not a prop in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. Thank you so much for following Emma's journey from beginning to end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our content. Drop a comment below sharing your biggest takeaway from the series. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're not furniture. We're the architects of our own lives.